She was 8 months pregnant. It was Christmas Eve. And her husband's family threw her out into the snow like she was nothing. No warning, no mercy, and no one standing up for her. Just her, a suitcase, and silence. But exactly 1 week later, that same woman who locked her out was now standing on her doorstep, broke, crying, and begging for help. What happened in those 7 days is the kind of karma you don't see coming. But first, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you've ever been betrayed, abandoned, or told to just be quiet to keep the peace, subscribe right now, because this channel, it's where we turn betrayal into blueprint, and pain into power. There are moments in life that don't just break your heart, they wake it up. For Tiana Rivers, that moment came wrapped in red ribbon and betrayal. It was Christmas Eve, and the world outside was hushed under a fresh blanket of snow. White lights blinked from porch railings. Laughter drifted from living rooms up and down the block. Inside the Carlisle home, though, the air was colder than the frost on the windows. Tiana stood in the doorway, 8 months pregnant, coat open, belly rising like a full moon under a knit sweater she'd worn every Christmas since college. Her breath fogged the glass as she stared out at the falling snow, suitcase in one hand, her dignity in the other. Behind her, the sound of the deadbolt clicking into place told her everything she needed to know. She wasn't welcome here anymore. "I told you, Damon," Rochelle Carlisle hissed from the other side of the door. "She disrespected me for the last time. If she wants to act like a guest, she can find another place to stay." Tiana didn't move. She didn't cry. She'd done all her crying in the bathroom earlier, pressing her hand to her stomach, whispering apologies to the baby inside her. She had begged for patience. She had swallowed every insult. She had hoped Damon, her husband, the father of her child, would be the one to finally stand up. But he hadn't. Minutes earlier, she had sat across from Rochelle at the long oak dining table, Christmas dinner cold on her plate. Tiana had cooked most of it. She'd wanted to bring her family's traditions to the Carlisle home: rosemary turkey, candied yams, cinnamon spiced cider. But Rochelle had only scowled and said, "Smells like you tried too hard." No one laughed. Damon kept his eyes on his phone. Later, in the kitchen, Rochelle had unleashed. "You don't belong here. You've been dividing this family since day one. You act like you're better than us just because you work some little charity job." Tiana, exhausted and humiliated, had whispered, "I just wanted peace tonight." To which Rochelle had smirked and said, "Then leave." And Damon, the man who had promised to protect her, to build a life with her, had stood silently, arms crossed, watching it unfold like a TV drama. When Rochelle demanded she leave, he simply mumbled, "Maybe it's just best if you go cool off at your sister's for a few days." Except her sister lived in Ohio. And she was in Chicago. And it was 11 o'clock on Christmas Eve. Tiana stepped off the porch and into the snow. She didn't look back. Her hands were shaking, not from the cold, from something deeper. From betrayal. From the kind of heartbreak that doesn't scream, it hardens. But here's what they didn't know. As that door closed behind her, something cracked open inside her. Not just pain, clarity. The kind that comes when you realize no one's coming to save you. That the people who should have lifted you are the ones pushing you off the ledge. She walked down that icy sidewalk like a woman reborn in grief, but also in grit. And by New Year's Day, the same woman who had thrown her out like trash would show up at her door, mascara streaked, desperate, and pleading for the same mercy she had once spit on. But back then, that night, Tiana didn't know she was about to become the author of her own comeback story. All she knew was this: she would never beg to be loved again. The wind sliced through Tiana's coat as she waited on the curb, hugging her belly and blinking back tears she refused to let fall. Her phone was at 7%, her pride at 0. It was nearly midnight. She called the only person who had never made her feel small, Leah, her best friend since college. No hesitation. No judgment. Just 6 words: "I'm on my way. Don't move." Leah's apartment was just over 20 minutes away, but that ride felt like an eternity. Inside the warmth of the car, Tiana stayed quiet. Leah didn't press. She just reached across the gearshift and squeezed Tiana's hand. When they got to Leah's apartment, a tiny one-bedroom walk-up, Tiana curled up on the couch under a fleece blanket and let the pain rise in waves. But even as the ache consumed her, she whispered, "This ain't gonna be my ending." She meant it. Over the next week, While families posted photos of matching pajamas and twinkling trees, Tiana moved differently. She wasn't mourning a marriage, she was mapping her escape. The version of herself that had stayed quiet in her in-laws' house? She was gone. Tiana tapped into every resource she had. She called an old colleague from her nonprofit job who helped her find temporary housing for women in transition. She filed for a protection order just in case Rochelle or Damon tried anything reckless. She even met with a counselor, not for therapy, but for strategy. She wasn't just surviving. She was rebuilding. But the ache came in strange places. Folding baby clothes donated from a church drop-off, she broke down. Not because she missed Damon, but because she had once believed they were a team. She had pictured him holding her hand in the delivery room, cutting the cord, whispering, "You did it." Instead, she now rehearsed hospital intake alone. And Damon? He had texted. Once. "I didn't want it to go down like that. I'm sorry. Let's talk when things settle." No call. No check-in about the baby. Not even a message on New Year's. The man who once pressed his ear to her belly and said, "She's gonna change our whole world," had disappeared when that world cracked. And that hurt more than she could explain. But pain, as she was learning, could be fuel. By December 30th, Tiana had moved into a studio apartment, nothing fancy, but hers. The first night, she stood in the middle of the empty living room, hand on her stomach, and whispered, "We're gonna be all right." That night, she made a promise. No matter who came knocking, she would never let herself be treated like an option again. And while she was learning how to let go of love that abandoned her, she had no idea that the very people who'd left her in the cold were now falling apart without her. But that part of the story, the twist, the downfall, the reckoning, was just around the corner. She didn't need revenge. Life was already preparing it for her. The calendar had flipped. It was officially January 1st. Most people were making resolutions, sipping leftover cider, or setting intentions for the new year. Tiana? She was scrubbing the kitchen floor of her studio apartment on her hands and knees, belly swollen, lower back aching. Not because it needed to be spotless, but because she needed to feel in control of something. Anything. That morning, she had written one line in her journal. "This year, I choose me," loudly, unapologetically, and without delay. She closed the journal and went about her day. But just after lunch, there was a knock on her door. Not a text. Not a call. A knock. Her body stiffened. She wasn't expecting anyone. She looked through the peephole, and her heart did a somersault. Damon. He looked rough. Hood up, beard grown out, eyes sunken. The man who once polished his shoes before every dinner was now standing on her doormat like a stranger from a different lifetime. And behind him, sitting in a parked car with the engine running, was the last person she ever expected to see again, Rochelle Carlyle. Tiana blinked hard. She opened the door halfway but did not step aside. "Hey," Damon said, voice low. "Can we talk?" Tiana folded her arms. "Now you want to talk." He exhaled. "I messed up. I know that. But we're in trouble." She said nothing. And then came the truth. Turns out, the Carlyle house, the very one she had been kicked out of, was gone. Foreclosed. Rochelle had been keeping secrets. While pretending to be financially stable, she had been draining Damon's joint account to cover personal debts. Credit card bills. A failed real estate investment she'd never told anyone about. Damon hadn't even known about half of it, until the eviction notice showed up on their doorstep. The bank had seized the property right after Christmas. On top of that, Rochelle had been let go from her retirement consulting gig. And now? They had no home, no savings, and nowhere to go. Damon looked at Tiana, eyes full of desperation. "I didn't know what she was doing. I swear to God, T, I didn't. And now, we just need a place. Just for a few nights. I'll sleep on the floor. Whatever it takes." From the window, Tiana watched as Rochelle turned her face away, unable to meet her gaze. The same woman who called her ungrateful was now outside her door, homeless and humiliated. But this wasn't the moment of revenge Tiana had imagined. Because what washed over her wasn't satisfaction. It was something else. Power. For the first time in years, she wasn't the one waiting to be chosen. She was the one with the choice. She looked Damon dead in the eyes. "Let me ask you something. When your mama threw me out, pregnant, in the snow, did you speak up? Or did you just watch me walk away?" Damon's shoulders slumped. He didn't have to answer. His silence had spoken loud enough that night. She nodded slowly, controlled. Then consider this, temporary. Just until you figure out how to be a man your daughter would be proud of. She handed him a folded piece of paper, the name of a shelter 2 blocks away, and a number for a housing advocate. And then, just like they had done to her, she closed the door. Not with rage. Not with cruelty. But with clarity. Behind the door, she exhaled. Not because it was easy, but because for the first time, it was right. Tiana stood behind the door long after it clicked shut, hand still resting on the knob, breathing slow and heavy. On the other side, she could hear Damon's footsteps crunching in the snow. Faint voices. A car door opening. Then nothing. No yelling. No banging. No desperate knocking. Just the hush of a January afternoon, and the quiet roar of peace settling into her bones. She slid down to the floor and rested her head against the doorframe, one hand on her belly. Her daughter kicked softly, as if to remind her, "We're still here." Still standing. For the first time since that night on Rochelle's porch, Tiana allowed herself to cry. Not because she missed Damon. Not because she regretted her decision. But because the moment had finally come, and she had faced it on her terms. The woman they threw out was gone. The woman sitting here now? Unshakable. Over the next few days, life moved on. Damon didn't call. Rochelle didn't text. And Tiana didn't go looking for closure that would never come. She poured her energy into preparing for her daughter's arrival, assembling the crib, organizing clothes, sorting bottles, attending prenatal appointments alone but not lonely. Each time she felt tempted to reach out, to offer softness, to give in to nostalgia, she reminded herself, love without respect is not love. It's self-erasure. She had erased herself for far too long. Still, healing wasn't linear. There were moments when the ache crept in, folding laundry while imagining the family she never got to build, waking up from dreams where Damon was still the man she once believed he could be. But those were grieving pains, not regrets. And grief is allowed. One late afternoon, Leah came by with soup and conversation. Tiana told her everything. The knock on the door, the shelter referral, the way Rochelle had turned her face away. Leah listened, then said, "You didn't just walk away from them. You chose yourself. That's the kind of courage most people never reach." Tiana smiled faintly. "I don't feel brave. I just feel done." Leah nodded. Sometimes, done is the bravest place to be. And that was the truth. She wasn't angry anymore. Not really. The fire had cooled. But what remained was firmness. A quiet refusal to re-enter any room where her voice would be muted. Weeks passed. The baby's due date neared. Then, just as winter began to soften its grip, Tiana received a letter. Handwritten. No return address. Inside was a note in Damon's familiar scrawl. I went to the shelter. I've started counseling. Got a job moving boxes at a warehouse. I'm trying to become someone our daughter can be proud of. I don't expect forgiveness. Just the chance to show you I'm learning. One day at a time. She stared at the letter, heart tight in her chest. Not because she was moved, but because for once, he wasn't asking for anything. No place to stay. No second chance. Just a seed of accountability. And that was something. But she didn't pick up the phone. Not yet. She folded the letter and placed it in a small box she had labeled maybe. Because when people show you change, not in words but in works, then maybe you open the door again. Until then, her peace would remain locked and sacred. It's strange how quickly life shifts. A year ago, Rochelle Carlyle was the kind of woman who held court at Sunday dinners, hosting with pressed linens and passive-aggressive grace. But now? She was living in the spare room of her cousin's condo in the South Loop, watching her reputation unravel, one whisper at a time. Word had gotten out. Not the full story, of course. But just enough for those tight-lipped neighbors and polished church friends to know, Rochelle lost the house. Damon's wife left him. Something went down around Christmas. What none of them knew was the full truth, how she had weaponized control, turned her son against his own wife, and watched a pregnant woman walk out into the cold because her ego couldn't stomach humility. But karma doesn't always arrive in thunder. Sometimes, it comes through quiet decay. Rochelle spent most of her days staring out a borrowed window, folding laundry that wasn't hers, and scrolling through job listings that she knew she wasn't qualified for anymore. The calls she used to get, invitations, check-ins, deference, had slowed to a trickle. She would never admit it, but some nights she cried. Not because she missed Tiana. Not yet. But because for the first time, she wasn't the center of anyone's world. And Damon? He was trying. Not with grand gestures or showy apologies, those days were over. After the letter he sent, he began the slow climb. Every morning, he clocked in at the warehouse by 6 a.m. Every evening, he journaled and cooked his own meals at the halfway house. No one had to see it. No one had to applaud. He just kept going. One day, he ran into a former friend at the bus stop who asked, "Why haven't you tried to get her back? That's your wife, man." Damon just shook his head. "You don't get it. I already lost her the moment I didn't fight for her." But even so, he didn't give up. Instead, he asked for supervised visitation once the baby was born. Not to win Tiana back, but to show their daughter something different. A man trying to grow. A father who didn't run from responsibility. And as for Tiana, she was blooming. The studio apartment had become a haven, filled with soft lullabies, fresh flowers from the corner bodega, and laughter that belonged to her and her baby girl, Nova Grace Rivers. Nova had arrived in the world on a rainy February night, eyes wide and calm, as if she already knew the storm had passed before her first breath. Tiana didn't call Damon that night. But 2 weeks later, she agreed to meet him, at a park bench, with Leah sitting nearby, Nova bundled tight in a fuzzy pink coat. Damon held his daughter like she was glass and gold all at once. He didn't ask for anything. He just said, "She's perfect." Like her mom. Tiana nodded, not with affection, but with quiet recognition. This isn't about us anymore. It's about what she sees. What she remembers. What we model. And for the first time, Damon understood. He wasn't being punished. He was being asked to rise. Tiana didn't forgive him with words. She forgave him with boundaries. Supervised visits. Scheduled check-ins. Zero tolerance for guilt trips or backsliding. She was building a home, not just for Nova, but for the woman she was still becoming. And every day, she proved that walking away isn't the end of love. Sometimes, it's the beginning of self-respect. The light in Tiana's apartment was soft that morning, the kind that makes everything feel warm, even in winter. Nova lay asleep in her bassinet, cheeks like rose petals, tiny fists curled near her face. Tiana stood by the window with her coffee in one hand and a notebook in the other, writing plans for the future, not dreams, goals. She had enrolled in an online leadership course through her nonprofit. Leah had offered to babysit during sessions. Her old manager had reached out about a part-time role with flexible hours. Life was unfolding, not in fireworks, but in small, steady affirmations. And more importantly, it was unfolding on her terms. She didn't hear from Rochelle. Not a word. No apology. No accountability. Just silence. And that was fine. Because Tiana had long stopped needing closure from the people who shattered her peace. She had learned that some people apologize only when their world collapses, not because they are sorry, but because they are exposed. And when that apology never comes, you move forward anyway. One evening in late March, Tiana got another letter from Damon. This one wasn't about Nova. It wasn't asking for more access. It was just honest. "I see now that I didn't just fail as a husband. I failed as a man. I let fear speak louder than love. And I know now that love, real love, is protection. Thank you for not letting me drag you down with me. I'm still working. Still growing. And I hope, one day, Nova will know that her father became better because her mother demanded better." She read the letter twice, then folded it and placed it in the same box as the first. The box labeled maybe. Because healing wasn't about perfect endings. It was about owning your chapter and knowing who should be in the next one. A few weeks later, at Nova's first doctor's appointment, the nurse commented, "She's so calm. Like she knows she's protected." Tiana smiled. "She is. She's surrounded by peace I had to fight for." And when she tucked Nova into bed that night, she whispered, "You will never have to wonder what strength looks like. You're living in it." Then, for the first time in a long time, she sat down and filmed a video, just for herself. No filters. No edits. Just truth. She spoke directly to the camera. To every woman who's ever been made to feel small in a house she helped hold together. To every mother who's been thrown out like she was disposable. To every partner who watched love turn into silence. Let this be your reminder. You don't need their validation to rise. You need your own voice to lead. Walk away. Build your peace. Protect your energy. And when they come knocking, remember, the door to your soul does not open to guilt. It opens to growth. She clicked save, not to post, but to remember. Because Tiana Rivers didn't just survive. She redesigned her entire life. If this story spoke to your spirit, drop a comment and share your moment of awakening. Like, share, and subscribe if you're choosing peace over approval in 2025. And remember, when you raise your standards, you raise your life.